Welcome my beloved student, how you doing? Hope you all are doing great and lovely. In this video we are gonna see, what if Deku had a blood and bone bending quirk? This is part 1, and for more amazing content, leave a like, share and subscribe. And I wanna thank the author of this story named Blood and Bone by IA1. So do check out and leave kudos. Let's get in the video. The gravity of the situation, of the facts at hand, they don't sink in immediately. They simmer right below the surface, equal amounts insidious and staggering. She's alone in her piece of shit Camry, windows all down, the wind almost drowning out the incessant nagging in her head. Her eyes idly trace the dark green silhouette of the trees framing the looping road. The name of this mountain range is on the tip of her tongue, she passed a sign not too far back that titled it. The glaze over her eyes feels sticky as she forlornly blinks, drawing her attention back to the road. And it hits her. Not in waves of grief, not in the stages she's heard of and even studied. Achako's heart dives into her stomach and she thinks she'll crash as she grips the wheel with white knuckles. Like her tough grip will pull her from this nightmare. Instead she pulls to the side of the road and brakes to a halt. All at once, it blows up in her fucking face. She's never had a weak stomach or anything, but as she shallowly heaves through her sobs, Achako feels bile sting up her throat and throws open her door. Her car is a piece of shit, but hey, it's a puke-less piece of shit. Once her stomach calms, she realizes that her heaves have become gasps. Sitting up in a panic, Achako frantically pulls the glove box open to palm for one of her inhalers. 3 puffs and the bunched up hem of her t-shirt later leaves her staring blankly at the open road ahead. Achako can't see how she looks, but she bets money that it isn't pretty. In a moment, a scene, a shitty little fragment of her 24 years on Earth, everything she's worked toward went to shit. Putrid, forgot to flush so it sat there liquid shit. And she isn't sure how but it must be her fault. She's always managing to mess things up. The cups rack her body as she slaps at her round cheeks, trying to snap herself out of her daze, but all it leaves is an uncomfortable warmth behind. Sure. They had some good times together. Achako can't lie to herself and say that there were many overwhelmingly amazing moments, but it was never bad. It just always been ordinary. But that's why Tenya had been the obvious choice. He's human. She laughs but it comes out wet and bitter. Humans are supposed to be easy. They're supposed to be a cakewalk in comparison to all the complicated customs, cultural expectations, and soulmate junk that's normal for the work community. A human won't expect her to have a ton of pups, won't throw her away for not letting him mark her, won't hate her for being defective. Achako figured it out right from the beginning of her first, only, and now last relationship, even if everything was a little dull, it was better than being alone. Her heart skips 3 beats as she freezes, neck stiff as she spirals. So maybe Achako needs to just face up to the truth. If she wasn't good enough for a human man, she'll never be good enough for anyone. Some defective are just meant to be alone, so many of them never find their soulmates, and for a rattling moment, Achako is sure she doesn't even have one. She fumbles with her phone, slipping it off the passenger seat and into her alarmingly pale hands. When the ringing cuts through the silence of her car, she prays to Goddess that the person on the other side answers. She tilts her head toward the padded ceiling and closes her eyes. Hey, honey, what's going on? Achako chokes out one word, it sounds like a prayer or maybe a whimper as her lips quiver over it. Mom. 8 hours earlier. She doesn't process that there's a milky white hand waving in her face until it gets close enough to graze her nose. Achako jumps, knocking her knee on her flimsy little cubicle desk before spinning her computer chair around to pout at Sai. Do you like scaring me or something? The other woman shrugs her slim shoulders as she settles into her own seat, not taking her eyes off Achako. Where were you, Achako? You really zoned out. Achako nips at her lip, worrying it as she turns away from Tsayu, she's always been so observant. It's the reason why she's the only person outside of Tenya who knows where she's actually from. Humans know about where and their territories, both tolerate one another, but it tends to be tedious at best. And Achako knows intimately well after growing up as the hybrid runt of a highly aggressive pack how most were feel about humans. That same pack is the reason why she decided to leave pack life and work culture behind in an attempt to start fresh. However, things aren't that much better among humans. Most of the humans she's met never liked how blunt and straightforward she can be. Achako's lost count the amount of times her honesty and brash tendencies have been called turn-offs. For nearly 7 years she's lived with humans and she's still adjusting to the culture. Which is why humans that actually pay attention like Tsayu can be dangerous. Achako meets Tsayu's gaze and only finds kindness. Thankfully, her friend is one of a kind, even with Tenya, it had taken months of her spelling the truth out to him before she finally gave in and told him of her heritage. That was years ago. She spins the simple engagement band on her ring finger and sighs. Tenya had almost been interesting at first, Achako was brand new to all things human and he served as a sort of foundation for her. Now, it's like they're acquaintances who sleep, eat, and live together. Her prolonged silence gets a shallow huff from Sayu, then it's Ida, again. What happened? Ichako blanches. Damn, Sayu. Huh. What makes you think Tenya has something to do with it? She rolls her wide eyes, walking to her chair before falling down into it leisurely. You're my best friend, Ichako. Sayu is all she has left in the city. Her first and only friend. So when she thinks about it, it's pretty insulting to Sayu that Ichako thinks she can hide her feelings without the other woman noticing. Ichako traces the framed picture of her and Tenya at their college graduation. I just keep thinking things are okay with me and him because they should be. I haven't done anything wrong, I know I haven't because I don't do anything. She's gotta look crazy, throwing her hands in the hair and furiously scrubbing her short bob, but we don't even talk anymore. It's either small talk or nothing, absolutely nothing. We're just strangers who sleep in the same bed, it's nothing like it should be, nothing like we're engaged. Sayu's arms are warm and thin as they close around her, her right cheek is brought to rest against the smaller woman's flat chest. The embrace grounds her, and she realizes her face is wet with frustrated tears, and her nose is stuffed. Ichako Sayu soothes as she pulls away, why didn't you say something sooner? That's a loaded question, Ichako isn't sure she has an answer. She is so used to doing things on her own, so used to not being able to trust anyone. It's strange to have a person to reach out to, even after all the years she's known Sayu. She hates burdening others, there's nothing she hates more. Ichako clears her throat, it's been months like this, I figured it'd get better. But then it, didn't. Sayu slides into her own computer chair, not looking convinced by Ichako's words. She takes a long moment to stare at the picture of Ichako and Tenya. Is it just the stuff with him? I know you've always been a little spacey. She shoots Ichako a wry smile that brings a small sheepish pull to Ichako's lips. But lately it's been bad. I feel like it can't just be all because of him. Ichako weighs her options quickly. Sayu really will be the death of her, she can't hide anything from her. Chances are that if she doesn't just outright disclose everything to Sayu now, the other will just psychoanalyze it out of Ichako later. Well again, she's not exactly sure where to start. Attempting to describe the fewer instincts she does have to a human isn't something she's sure she can do. But it's Sayu, so Ichako is sure she'll be able to keep up. It's natural for regular were to want community. They kinda need it, really. I left, and it felt like the right thing to do and I stand by it still. But things here just seem off. Ichako rubs at her face, wiping the crud out of her eyes before continuing. I'm missing something. This job, my degree, the apartment, Tenya, it all feels bland. Like I'm not seeing something big. Like, maybe I belong somewhere else. She blinks as she catches Sayu's gaze and immediately begins to backtrack. She loves Sayu and doesn't want to make her think she's anything less than her closest friend. The smaller woman is probably the only thing that has kept Ichako in the city all these years. As she goes to open her mouth to apologize, Sayu speaks up. I'll cover for you, Ichako. He's still working from home, right? Talk to him, try to get on the same page. I don't like seeing you so sad. She waves Ichako off with a small smile. She opens her mouth to start making excuses as to why she couldn't possibly leave early when Sayu gives her a pointed look. Ichako stands, grudgingly scuffing the toes of her flats against the tile. Fine. I'll go. She catches Sayu mid-nod and tackles her into a tight hug. Ichako pulls away to smile wide at her best friend, I'm really thankful for you, Sue. Knowing Sayu really isn't the affectionate type, she bounds out of their small cubicle with a new sense of determination. She should have talked to Tenya much sooner, just speaking to Sayu made her realize how unnecessary all her agonizing was. Nothing could have prepared Ichako for what came next. Ichako doesn't have the heightened sense of a normaler, but she's not an idiot. A little spacey. Yeah, she'll own up to that, but she isn't so far up her own ass that she can't notice the tense energy in her own apartment. It took her a full 5 minutes to amp herself up enough to even walk in. More than a couple times she found herself halfway down the hall, heading back to the elevator. Twisting her wedding band nervously, a habit she picked up quickly after the proposal, she lets her mind run wild as she paces in front of the door. There are so many what ifs. What if Tenya brushes her off? What if he calls her crazy? What if she really is overreacting and nothing's actually wrong? The only thing that's stopping her from bolting out of the building is a tiny voice in the back of her head that sounds unlike her mom. Even if it is nothing, trust yourself and try. In a flash, she swiftly unlocks the door and steps in quietly. Which brings her to the utter wrongness of the apartment. The fewer senses she has are jumping with anxiety as the hairs on her arms raise and the underneath of her boobs start to sweat. The first red flag is how dark the entire apartment is, all the lights are off. Tenya always did his editing in the living room in his designated recliner. Rain or shine, it's a consistent thing. But there's no Tenya in the living room or kitchen. It causes Achako to pause for a few moments as she tries to rationalize his absence. He could easily just be napping in their room or using the bathroom, or maybe he's not even home. As she goes to tow off her flats, a couple things happen. She hears muffled talking from the bedroom. Tenya is definitely home then and just in the room, no big deal. But then she sees the pair of floral patterned boots placed neatly in their shoe rack. And while she can admit they're super cute, they don't belong to her. She's barely registered that she's staring at another woman's shoes when she hears it. Clear as day, a woman's moan rings throughout the apartment, coming straight from the bedroom. Achako sags, heart sinking into her stomach and burning there furiously. Never has she wanted to disappear more in her life. The moaning, groaning, squeaking of their bed is only getting louder, and Achako belatedly realizes it's because she's moving down the hall, toward the room. She stops before the door, not even breathing, though, from the noises coming through the thin wood, they wouldn't even be able to tell if she was. She should just walk away, Achako tries telling herself. She should walk away and leave, go back to work and tell Tsuyu that everything went well. But she didn't waste 6 years of her life. Later she can peacefully talk to him about calling the engagement off and figure out what they'll do with the apartment. It was Achako's place to begin with, so he'd move out. Maybe he already has a place to stay. Maybe he'll stay with the owner of those pretty boots. Achako grabs the door handle, it practically vibrates in her hand. She's shaking. Part of her screams that she can still walk away and not make a huge scene. The larger half states the obvious. When was the last time she made him moan like that? Has she ever made him moan like that? She wryly recalls the silent quickie they had last week that left her barren, used, and cold. Why isn't she ever enough for anyone to give their all to? Her body is on autopilot, she's outside of herself as she slams the bedroom door open, her lip curling back into a betrayed snarl. She probably looks like an insubordinate pup in comparison to what the real work can do, but Achako is confident she still looks fearsome. The sound of the doorknob colliding with the wall behind it jolts both of the people in bed. Tenya. Her normal plain, sweet, fiancé. He's pale as a sheet next to the slim, lanky, model-esque looking woman on Achako's side of the bed. She's everything Achako's not, and the invisible knife that's firmly lodged in between her ribs twists viciously. There are so many things she wants to say. They all come tumbling forth to the front of her mind, but none filter all the way through. She wants to curse him, sob, scream. But none of that translates into the silent, stuffy air of the room. Like a safety net, her legs guide her straight to her closet, all the way stuffed in the back are suitcases and duffel she hasn't needed since she moved in. The couple watches on, in what Achako hopes is horror, as she splays the bags across the floor and begins ripping her clothes off her hangers, stuffing them into the large suitcase. She hears mumbling behind her, which is quickly followed by the frantic exit of the pretty woman. Tenya continues to sputter incomplete sentences at Achako, but she's already moved on to packing the clothes in her dresser. It's only after she moves past him to grab a duffel to load her documents and books that he speaks to her. You're not seriously leaving, are you? Her blood bubbles in her veins, face flushing with anger as she fights herself to stay quiet. Instead of answering him, she scoops all the books, pictures, and folders off her dresser and into her bag. Achako, please. She feels a hint of remorse as his voice cracks with tears, but before the feeling gets a chance to grow into sympathy, she snatches another duffel and heads to the bathroom. Every box of pads and tampons, every peach-scented body wash, conditioner, shampoo, her brushes, and combs. She plucks her pink toothbrush from beside his blue one. After she sloppily throws all the toiletries into the bag, she zips it up and hauls it to the rest of her things. Achako wraps an arm around her waist, holding herself soothingly as she takes a moment to scan the significantly emptier space. She nods once to herself, a sense of finality settling in her chest as she wraps the duffel bags around the handle of her suitcase, rolling it in front of her as she leaves the room. Tenya follows at her heels urgently, talking gibberish until she starts loading her shoes into one of the bags. Finding his spine, he goes from his hysteric tone to a much more demeaning one. Where will you even go, Achako? You have no one. You never have, we need each other. Her grip on the zipper as she pulls the bag closed hurts. I have my mom. You need to let me explain. She stands up straight and opens the front door silently. You can't leave me. It was one mistake, just one. The moment Tenya reaches a clammy hand out to tug her back to him, the second his tight grasp wraps around the curve of her wrist. Achako feels a switch. In the depths of her mind or maybe her soul, something she has never felt before stirs with the delight of an uncaged beast. It growls and lashes out. But strength Achako didn't know she had, she tears away from him with enough time to slap him clear across the face. The smack echoes through their apartment, then reverberates through the stinging skin of her hand. Never. She hisses. You will never touch me, ever again. Achak. No. Achako steers her bags out of the apartment. She's taken 4 steps toward the elevator when Tenya's voice cuts through the hall, strained with anger. 6 years. Just like that, Achako, you would throw all that time away that easily? The snarl tears passed her lips, instantly swiveling around to glare at him. I threw it all away. Me? She snorts viciously. Tenya, you threw everything away. Everything. This was your choice, you caused this. Achako is vindictive as she takes a few precise steps toward her ex-fiancé. Malice pouring off her in waves as she watches him shrink, then crumble. She waits until she's almost close enough to touch him to continue. Take your engagement, take your bullshit, and take this ring. Achako slips the band off her finger like it burns, and go fuck yourself, Ida. We're done. She drops the ring where she stands, turns, and pushes her bags to the elevator. Ida doesn't ever need to know that the moment those metal doors shut, all the power simmering beneath her skin dissipates. She's left with a gnawing sensation that aches bitterly, followed by wave after wave of insecurity. She's numb to the core as she loads her tiny car up, and numb as she gets in to begin her drive to someplace far away from the city that's held her for 6 years. Present. Achako. What happened? She shakily sighs, a lot. Achako wipes at her eyes and tries to clear her head enough to not sound like an idiot. A lot happened, Mom. She sounds cryptic and obnoxious. Achako wants to elaborate, but before she can, Mikoto is already answering. Where are you now? I can hear your car running. Achako will never get used to the super hearing, it's more than creepy. But she doesn't give herself time to dwell, a new set of tears bites at the backs of her eyes. I miss you. I miss being with you. I thought I could handle it, but Achako whimpers, I can't. I really can't. I feel so stupid. Mikoto cuts her tangent off gently, and she's reminded again how much she's missed the older woman. I'm sending you my address. I want you to come here to stay. It'll be good for you to be around an honorable pack. Achako cringes, honorable, huh? She rolls her eyes spitefully, what, they don't bully little kids at this one? Her mom sighs sadly, and Achako instantaneously feels terrible for her smartass commentary. It's not anything like how it was at League. Achako shudders upon hearing the name of the pack. I can't apologize enough for never noticing how they acted toward you, baby. She sags into her seat, trying her best to forget the look on Mikoto's face when she packed all her bags just hours after her high school graduation. But it's burned into her memory. But Achako sits up a little as her mom continues, the people here at UA, they're amazing. Never have I seen or heard of a pack that functions so well while still being compassionate, Achako. This is a community, it's a family here. You need that, I can tell just by the sound of your voice. Achako bites her lip as she considers her options. Well. Option? She has nowhere else to go, doesn't know what else to do, and maybe, just maybe her mom is right. Okay. The smile in her mother's voice is radiant, even just through the phone. I already know the alphas are going to take a real liking to you. I'm positive everyone will. And hey, wait. She's hung up before Achako can clarify. Alphas. Alphas as in plural. Nature is one of those things that Achako didn't realize she deprived herself of. When they had been a part of League, nature was this constant entity that surrounded her and made her feel seen. They would have picnics in her mama's gardens whenever they were both free, the air was always fresh, and when she was younger and skinny, Achako would climb to the tops of trees and pretend that if she fell she'd stick the landing like a real were. But shit happened. Mikoto got so busy as pack doctor that they didn't have their picnics anymore, and it became normal for Achako to not see her for days at a time. League had also become impoverished due to the Alpha not allocating funds properly. The council had to strike a deal with a human-owned fracking company in order to feed the pack for an especially harsh winter. That was the end of the fresh air. And finally, Achako had been oblivious to the weight she had put on due to puberty until she went climbing up her favorite tree and a once sturdy branch gave under her weight. She didn't stick the landing and was left with 2 fractured ribs and a shattered ankle. It was around then that she decided to start being realistic. But for some reason with her newly adopted realism, her need to be around nature had diminished. A city, any city seemed like it would be a safe haven. Somewhere far and crowded where people wouldn't single her out. It didn't matter to her if it wasn't nearly as beautiful. However, as she drives farther and farther into what she can only assume is the heart of the forest, she's reminded of how much she missed the greenery. The gravel road rocks her car like a cradle, but she pays more attention to the overlapping ferns and trees that line the path as far as the eye could see. It's out of nowhere that cabins start appearing on the sides of the road. Their porches are covered in flowers of all colors, chimes, and toys are strewn along the banisters. As soon as Achako stops marveling at how adorable the cabins are, she notices all the different people meandering around. Shifted and unshifted alike, walking alongside each other, skipping, playing, chatting. Their mirth is palpable through the dirty windows of her car, and Achako tries her best to swallow her envy. They all stare at her shitty little car like it's an anomaly as she haphazardly searches for street signs once she comes to an intersection. Her mother's instructed ride at the intersection leads her toward a community center that has surrounding plazas that house clothing stores, restaurants, and even a farmer's market. She spots the hospital and school a little farther down and comes to the immediate conclusion that this isn't just a little settlement. It's an entire town. Ochako curses a storm under her breath as she distractedly turns left at the next intersection, driving away from the lively center. Almost immediately, she's gasping at the sight of the massive lake to the right of the narrow road. The water is so clear she can see all the colorful stones at the bottom, the sandbanks littering the perimeter of the water are mostly empty. It's sudden but where the lake was in clear view is blocked by a house. The design isn't like all the similar cabins she'd seen before. There's another massive house right by where the turnaround for the dead end is, but Ochako doesn't spare it any attention because she hears chimes, her chimes. Her eyes snap to the left side of the road where there's a large redwood cabin, and Ochako can see the huge garden in the back and she knows. Then there, pacing by the front door is Makoto. She barely gives herself enough time to turn her car off before hopping out, ambling to the porch. There she wraps herself in her mom's arms. Makoto's hugs are always warm, they feel like coming home, and Ochako's sure that they always will. It shocks her when she's the one to pull away first and soothe Makoto's tears, smiling at her until the older woman sports a matching grin. Makoto still stands half a head taller than Ochako, her brown hair in its usual long ponytail and brown eyes still stern and kind. "I missed you, baby. Don't ever let me go so long without seeing you again." Ochako giggles at the light scolding she receives, she goes to spin her engagement ring on her finger, and its absence grounds her. The air turns somber as her smile grows shaky. Makoto notes the shift, "Let's get you inside, we have so much to catch up on." It takes Ochako 3 mugs of kai and half a box of tissues to explain everything. She talks about how boring the relationship was despite its supposed stability because it makes her feel better for a moment. Then drones on about her shitty desk job at the bank, but gushes about Sai. Ochako can't talk about the actual betrayal without sobbing. She leaves out some of the details because it tears at her too harshly. Doesn't tell her about how he looked when she told him they were done, doesn't tell her about what he said to her, how he spun it on her, and how at the root of it, she still believes it is her fault. Makoto listens, she laughs at the funny parts, growls at the sad ones. It's when they're cuddled together on the largest couch in the living room, feet brushing that she realizes how much she's missed affection. How much she's missed being held without the presence of ulterior motives. The sun is going down by the time Makoto finally sits up straight and pulls away from Ochako. On Fridays, we have packed dinner, everyone eats together in the community center. Ochako sits up straight, a little shocked. Everyone? That must be huge. Does the pack even have enough food to do big dinners like that? If there is one thing she couldn't forget about pack life, it's how much were ate. Packs often struggled with rations and resources due to not receiving any kind of federal aid. Money had always been tight at league. Ochako and Makoto never went without because of their gardens, but often it was only the strongest that would eat. Makoto just smiles serenely, UA wolves never go without. Plus, ultra. Above and beyond. It's the pack mantra. This is easily the most well-resourced and prosperous pack I've ever known. We all eat, baby, no one goes hungry. Ever. Ochako takes in how much pride her mom has in this pack, the woman never trusts easily, which means that the praises she sings were earned. Her mama stands, looking a little sullen, "I would skip it so we could eat together, just us two, but both alphas are away. As pack doctor, I should be there to show solidarity." Ochako bobs her head, agreeing as she stretches before she realizes that again, her mother said alphas so it hadn't just how it sounded over the phone. Alphas? As in more than one? Makoto watches her blink owlishly before patting Ochako on the head. "Like I said, UA is different." She continues to puzzle as Makoto floats around the house, gathering a few things into a satchel before heading to the front door. "You need good people, good friends. Community, Ochako. Come." Ochako can't deny that just like she can't deny the nervous tremble in her legs as she stands to join Makoto. Ochako watches curiously as the affection the UA packmates have for each other manifests in the form of snuggles, hugs, and kisses. Well, she hadn't grown up in a stable doting or even friendly pack, it took Ochako a good year and a half to get used to how formal humans were when she first moved away from our society. Her stomach turns with dread as she realizes she is the outsider again. Ochako watches in awe as unabashed love circulates around the massive town center from person to person. She moves her attention to the massive rafters of the ceiling before she hurts her own feelings. The center itself is impressive, definitely large enough to comfortably host several thousand pack members, as well as the friends of members who are approved by border security. Achako is quickly learning that she may have just casually joined an extremely powerful pack. Makoto barely makes it into the hall before she's being accosted by a group of older women. They swarm around Makoto. "You had us worried sick, Kodo. Absolutely sick. You just get a phone call, turn pale as a sheet, and disappear." Achako can't help but laugh at her mom's expense as Makoto's cheeks are pinched at and she's nuzzled from every angle by the three women. Unfortunately, her laughter draws all the attention to her and she tenses up as they examine her. Makoto clears her throat as she pulls away from the women and moves to stand next to Achako. "Ladies, I'd like you to meet my..." The oldest of the three cuts her off with fervor, "Your daughter." "Oh, Makoto." They all step carefully toward Achako like she's a wounded animal and she snorts at the irony. "She looks just like you. Isn't she a beauty? I bet you're proud, Dr. Uraraka." They each give her greeting nuzzles that make Achako fuzzy. She smiles dopily at the three of them. "Achako, these are my nurses. Before I took over, Shuzenji was the pack doctor. They called her recovery girl, these are her sisters." Achako has always been really good at meeting new people. She lets the compliments roll off her back since they're almost always superficial and doesn't let the curious looks bother her. All she really has to do is wait for them to realize. The new people she meets always figure out she's an outsider before she even gets the chance to know them. It's Nurse Shuzenji who eventually takes a few sniffs in her direction before quirking a brow. "Are you not presented, dear?" Achako stiffens before opening her mouth to explain, but nothing comes out as she completely blanks. Makoto seems to give her a free pass as she does the talking for her. Achako's father was a human, she's a hybrid. She'll present, she's just a late bloomer. Achako tries to match the confidence in Makoto's voice, but she can tell that no one buys the wobbly look on her face. Her mother can hold out all the hope she wants, but Achako is done wishing that she'll magically present. Even if she did, wouldn't that be a whole other layer of discrimination she'd face? Solely based on what she presents as. There's always gonna be some sort of drawback no matter what, and in some ways, she prefers not having a second gender and existing outside of those standards. Of course, that comes with an entirely different set of consequences. Like now. There's no way to ever be fully prepared for the backlash that comes with being a hybrid. Achako can only brace herself and guess what sequence will come out of the truth being revealed. Maybe it'll be glaring, maybe she'll have to leave the town center, or even leave the community. Her mom said it's different here, but Makoto put trust in the wrong people before and it had been at Achako's expense in the end. "Oh," Nurse Shuzenji mumbles, pausing for a moment, and all Achako can do is steel herself. "The Ishido girl was a late bloomer too, wasn't she?" One of the sisters nods fervently. "She's a hybrid too, she only presented a few years ago." They chat amongst each other, trying to remember details about the Ishido girl, and all Achako can do is gape. None of them look at her sideways or curl their lips back at her. She knows her jaw must be on the damn floor because Makoto casually taps her on the cheek before continuing to chat. "I should introduce you to, Achako. You and Ishido would get along great." Achako nods numbly, still in awe at how in stride the women took her being defective. Before she really knows what's happening, she's being pulled farther into the hall. Left and right, people greet her mother who smiles gently and greets them all in return. There are tons of curious looks being thrown her way, but none of them, not a single one, is malicious. Makoto leans in to whisper in her ear, "See that family over there?" Achako easily picks out the large family with little ones running everywhere. The mother is human, the father is he's a part of border patrol. Her eyes bug out of her head as she watches the family's children mingle and play with shifted and unshifted pups. "It's not just them either, Achako. All around you are hybrids, humans, and This is an inclusive community, I mean it." Makoto gives Achako's hand a squeeze before leading her toward a grouping of tables near the middle of the room. It's then that it happens. The lone howl cuts through the chatter of the room and it carries on for several heart-stopping moments. Her hands are sweating worse than they have all night. And as she tries to spot where the noise is coming from, the community takes her by surprise by returning the howl. Even her mom pauses and tilts her head to the ceiling. After their chorus of howls, the room falls silent and expectant. In a moment, the kindest voice Achako's ever heard in her life echoes through the center passionately. "UA wolves, UA friends, UA family. Another week of hard work has brought us more success than even the humble pioneers of this pack ever imagined." A stir of movement around the room catches her eye as she realizes a handful of people are covering their hearts with their right hands and kneeling on their left knee before standing back up. Makoto quickly supplies after catching the confused look on her face, "Some of the few who have been here since the beginning." Acknowledgement is big in this pack. She bobs her head distractedly, trying to locate the voice. "We would be lost without the contributions of our people." From the border patrol who stopped a violent rogue from entering our territory 4 nights ago, the crowds cheer as border patrol members repeat the kneeling motion from before. To our farmers whose harvest will feed us for moons to come, the farmers repeat the movement while the room continues to boom its approval. To our children who feed their minds each day in school. Achako is sure her heart is going to burst as she watches all the kids kneel proudly with huge grins on their little faces. To my mates, who are not with us tonight as they forge alliances with the coastal and northland packs, all to ensure that we may continue to live as we do. The room erupts with howls once more. As your seer, I have predicted only light, prosperity, and love in these coming weeks. Irritated, Achako hops up on her tiptoes. She wants to lay eyes on this guy, he's obviously important, and something about his voice was gnawing at her. Finally, not too far away and standing on a platform, is a man with curly green hair. Even from where he stands, Achako can tell he's absolutely handsome. Freckles splattered across his cheeks, shoulders squared and broad. His eyes are piercing green, one she's never seen before. They scan the crowds as he goes to finish his speech. May we pray to the goddess herself that we may continue to. Achako blinks, the abrupt snag in the otherwise smooth speech brought her attention back to those eyes and away from the width of his shoulders. Goosebumps ripple down the backs of her arms as she realizes he's looking directly at her. His striking eyes are wide, mouth still open from his powerful words, body tense, and nostrils flaring. Achako cocks her head curiously. She doesn't know him, she'd have remembered someone like him in detail. Dread strikes her as she considers the worse. Maybe her mom was wrong again, maybe he's realized she isn't one of them and never will be. Maybe he's disgusted by her. Achako stares back at him, he doesn't seem disgusted though. Just stunned. Before anyone can begin to whisper their concern, he continues. Excuse me. May we pray to the moon and praise the goddess herself that we may continue to live in unity. Please, please eat. The pack takes the pause in stride as they howl and cheer, flocking to the tables overflowing with food. But Achako doesn't move an inch, stuck on the fact that the green-haired man still hasn't taken his eyes off of her. Did you see that? Achako asks just as she loses sight of him. Makoto shrugs easily as they head closer to where the food is. What, Midoriya? He's shy, sometimes he needs a moment to regroup. Especially when his mates aren't present. Achako shakes her head, no, the way he was looking at me. Makoto outright laughs, stopping at one of the long tables full of food. Baby, I promise you he wasn't looking at you like that. He's made it to the alphas, so Midori already has his hands very full. Achako pouts for a few moments until a plate is shoved into her hands by a woman her mother has started chatting with. It's only as she ogles all the food that Achako realizes how hungry she actually is. Her stomach rumbles eagerly as she fills her plate until it's so heavy she's gotta hold it with 2 hands. And it's after she's done fixing her plate that she realizes she's lost her mother. Achako lets the food distract her from the panic of being on her own in a room of strangers. She isn't the one with advanced senses, after all. Makoto will find her eventually. Achako huffs and goes to sit against a wall as she starts taking large bites out of a warm roll. It's when she's finishing her third and final gravy-drenched roll, she notices a shadow standing over her. So you're Doc's kid. A hybrid, who would have thought? The woman's pink hair is the first thing Achako notes, followed by how the whites of her eyes are black. Before she can stop herself she blurts, your eyes. The pink-haired woman recoils and all Achako can do is mentally beat herself up for already messing up. The woman takes an intimidating step toward Achako, who's trying her best to sink into the wall and disappear forever. Yeah? What about them? They're cool is all, I've never seen anything like them before. I'm sorry for being rude. Instantly the taller woman is stepping back and exhaling as she scratches the back of her neck, looking a little guilty. Nah, I'm the one who's sorry. Didn't mean to get defensive like that. Achako blinks a few times before standing, almost dropping her plate as she waves her hand. No. I shouldn't have commented like that, they're just so unique is all, and I shouldn't have cornered ya, girl. It's cool. There's a pause and Achako goes to spin her ring nervously, but it's not there. It's with Iida back in the city hours and hours away. She's sure she visibly deflates as her mood darkens. Hey. I feel bad, you don't gotta look so sad. Let's try this again. She extends a friendly hand toward Achako, Ashido Mina. My friends call me, Mina. Achako pulls herself out of her pity party because this is the girl the nurses spoke about earlier, she's a hybrid too. She shakes her hand lightly, you're Raka Achako. You're a hybrid too, right? Nurse Shuzenji talked about you. Ashido grins and leans against the wall to the right of Achako. I presented when I was 19 and that was 5 years ago. I can remember it like it was yesterday. Achako watches how dreamy and happy Ashido's eyes get and almost feels the palpable relief exuding from the woman. She doesn't let her envy obscure how special it must have been for Ashido. What was it like? She tilts her head taking a hearty bite from her roll. Ashido snorts, like your whole life someone's been sitting on your chest and suddenly they just get up and fuck off forever. Achako almost chokes on her roll as she laughs around it and Ashido joins in. When their giggles calm, Ashido asks. How old are you? And isn't that the $1,000,000 question? No one's ever heard of someone being above the age of 20 and presenting. She sighs wistfully, I'll be 25 in December. Ashido winces before she can stop herself, but Achako really doesn't take any offense. The pink-haired woman reaches out and ruffles Achako's already messy hair. Don't give up hope. I don't know where you came from, but here it'll be hard to lose hope. You just has gotta have some, to begin with. And for some reason, those words paired with Ashido's kind and knowing smile, makes Achako trust the other woman. From what she's seen, UA is genuinely not discriminatory and members care for each other. That's all anyone can ask for in a community and it's all she's ever wanted in a pack. Achako squares her shoulders, yeah. You're right, Ashido. She's met with a rueful smile. I told you before. My friends call me Mina. By the time Mikoto finds Achako, Mina and her are tied as thieves. They quickly discovered that they have similar humor, though Mina is much cruder. Mikoto approaches them as they squawk with laughter, curled up next to each other on the floor. Mina notices the older woman first, hey doc. You got a pretty cool kid. She elbows Achako playfully. I do don't I? Achako blushes and stands up, cracking her back a little before hurrying over to the nearest trash can to chuck her plate. She heads back to the two women in time to catch the end of their conversation. It's not like him. Do you think he was just overwhelmed not having the alphas here? Mina shrugs a shoulder, looking clueless, I thought he was doing fine. I'm just as surprised he just as outright left before eating or anything. Especially not without saying something to me or the others. Achako clears her throat, what are you talking about? More like who? But she has a feeling she already knows the answer. Midoriya, our hunky seer. Mina waggles her brows before turning semi-serious, I'll explain now since it'll come up later anyways. I'm one of the main betas. There's 6 of us, one of our tasks is making sure Midoriya is okay when Bakubro and Todoroki aren't around. He left in a hurry right after his speech which is very unlike him, Mikoto adds thoughtfully. Achako cocks her head, what even is a seer? Mina raises her brows at her before turning her gaze on Mikoto, giving her a look, she don't know what seers are. Doc, come on. Mikoto puts her hands up defensively, there wasn't a seer at League, there aren't many left at all, Ashido. The pink-haired woman huffs, nodding her head somberly in agreement. Seers are omegas who have been given the power of prophecy from the goddess. They can roughly foresee the future. Mikoto gently explains this as she leads them out of the community center which, Achako notes, is nearly empty. It's pretty rad, Midoriya helps a lot when it comes to alliances and battle strategy. Achako considers all this, she has one more question. Why not try to get it answered? So there's 2 alphas. And they share the seer. The word seer comes out of her mouth funny, but she waits expectantly for either one of them to answer. Instead, she gets peals of laughter from Mina and poorly hidden chuckles from her mother. What? Mina catches her breath, ha, they don't just as share Midoriya, they all love each other. The humans really have you out here thinking binary, that's no fun. Achako puffs her cheeks out and goes to retort, but Mikoto speaks before she can. The 3 of them have what is called a mating bond, all of them are soulmates and have marked each other, Achako. Wait, so the 2 alphas too? Yup, soulmates. Mina pauses, why you so curious? Trying to get an invite to their love nest. She's obviously teasing but Achako squeals in embarrassment while calling out her denials until they get out of the building. When are the alphas due back? Mikoto asks. Mina yawns into her hand, supposedly Todoroki is gonna be in Wednesday morning and Bakubro's tentative schedule is looking more and more like he won't be back till the beginning of June. That's almost an entire month. The beta nods gravely, we knew Northland was gonna take more time than Coastal. Just as not how much. Their conversation is cut off by a pitchy howl that Mina instantly returns before turning to Achako, who shifts her weight from foot to foot, not wanting to leave her new friend. The taller woman seems to sense this as she dives forward to knock their heads together playfully. I got rounds now, but I live in the dark wood cabin next to yours. We'll hang out a bunch from now on, you're Raka. I'll introduce you to the others too. Achako agrees, still a little sad, but she offers a smile to Mina who returns it and gives one last ruffle to Achako's brown locks. I'll swing by tomorrow around noon, I can introduce you to Midoriya too. She wags her brows before bounding off into the night. Achako yawns, feeling how exhausted she really is as it weighs down her eyelids. Mikoto notices with a concerned look. Let's get you to bed. Achako doesn't argue one bit. When Achako wakes up, her body is shifted to the right side of her new bed. Thigh hanging off the mattress, foot grazing the carpeted floor. It's a full-size bed. Makoto prepared the spare room before her arrival yesterday apparently. The mattress is kinda large for one person, but too small for two. In her sleep, she managed to edge herself over to her designated side, as if she were still back in the city in bed with Ida. It puts her in a bad mood for the rest of the morning. She spends almost an hour in the shower, scrubbing her skin until it turns red and basking in the ignorance of not knowing whether it was water or tears rolling down her cheeks. By the time she pads out of the bathroom swaddled in a spare robe and freshly moisturized, Makoto is sitting at the kitchen table with a finished plate of food in front of her, a cold plate of eggs, toast, and hash browns sit across from her. Ichako scratches the back of her head with an embarrassed frown, sliding into the wooden chair. "I didn't realize you were making breakfast. I'm sorry, Mom." Makoto waves her off. "Not a problem, baby. I figured you needed the sleep anyway." She stands up and clears her space before looping around to Ichako. "I do have to head to the hospital, though. Last week the flu was circulating and a few of the older pack members still need steady attention." She tries to stop the parallel from flashing through her head of being left alone for hours on end as a teen, her mother doing back-to-back shifts for League under threat of being kicked out for a better doctor. Ichako's fear must show on her face because Makoto pulls her into a soft embrace. "You can come by the hospital anytime. I have a break around 3 if you want to stop through. I could show you around town and introduce you to a few more people if you're up for it." Ichako feels centered as she's released. She can already tell that she's getting worse at hiding her emotions now that she's around other again. Ichako hesitantly agrees, hopeful but still not entirely convinced. It seems good enough for Makoto, who pops a kiss on her forehead and leaves. Silence surrounds Ichako for several beats as she stares down at her plate of food. It's the familiar ringing of the wind chimes that break it and bring her attention to the back deck. Ichako eats her lukewarm breakfast outside, marveling at the backyard that houses a view of lush forests and the overflowing garden Makoto clearly tends to with love. The ringing of the wind chime she made when she was much younger soothes her. And for a few beautiful minutes, she does not think about Tenya. When she returns to the kitchen to wash the dishes from breakfast, she goes to take off her ring. And when she remembers where it is, she's dragged back to square one. Makoto doesn't have a TV, so there is no distraction to be found there. Ichako didn't really want to look at her phone, but it was better than just pretending to clean the already impeccable house. There are several texts from Tsayu, a missed call from her job, a text, and a voicemail from Tenya. Ichako instantly deletes the voicemail. The last thing she wants is to hear his voice. The text simply states, "I know you will be back." The confidence burns Ichako, and she blocks his number in retaliation. The text is hurtful for however brief it actually is, and she belatedly wonders what was in the voicemail. An incoming call from Tsayu interrupts her thoughts, and she picks up immediately. "Ichako?" Her best friend's voice is familiar and worried. "Ichako, where are you? Are you okay?" She lets out a long breath through her nose. "I'm with my mom at her pack's territory. And I've been better, but it would have been worse if I'd stayed." It's Tsayu's turn to let out a long sigh, but it's full of relief. She then asks the million-dollar, highly triggering, question. "What happened?" She bites her bottom lip, wondering if she can go through the entire story again. But then part of her that's growing in power and opinion wonders if rehashing it will help her. Ichako listens to that budding piece of herself again. It's noon on the dot when Mina finds Ichako on the back deck in Makoto's wicker love seat. Not having the energy to unpack her car, she ended up throwing on a pair of jean shorts and a t-shirt she found in the closet of Makoto's spare room. Well, of Ichako's new bedroom. If the conversation with Tsayu wasn't draining enough, the call she made immediately after to resign from her 9-to-5 accounting job would have been. In comparison, that conversation had been much easier. She still needs to figure out how getting her name off the lease is gonna work, an issue Tsayu brought up that made Ichako's head spin even faster. "I'll come visit you as soon as I can," Tsayu promised her. "Perfect. I'll be looking forward to it." Ichako cheered with maybe too much enthusiasm to be real. Thankfully, Tsayu hadn't said anything about it. Mina snorts derisively once she's in front of Ichako, snapping the brunette from her daze. Ichako stands in surprise, mouth open to greet the pink-haired woman, but Mina interrupts her. "You're running from something. And you don't gotta tell me about it yet, but don't go acting over the top and faking how you feel for my sake." Ichako's jaw is practically resting on the wooden planks of the porch. She really forgot how blunt and spot-on Wer tends to be. Or maybe Mina is just special. She mouths at excuses, but nothing comes out. She doesn't want to bullshit anyone here. She's over being secretive, all she wants is to be herself. And right now she's hurt. "My fiancé. He cheated on me." Mina's eyes go wide. "We were together for 6 years. He's a human, I thought I'd be okay with him." Ichako can hear how lifeless she sounds. She's tired and doesn't want to go into detail, this was just stating the facts at hand. And that's exactly what they were. Facts. And you cheated on her with a human woman. Fact. Their relationship had always been boring. Fact. Since he proposed, things were especially stale. Fact. Ichako chose Tenya because he was safe. Fact. It's been a long time since she really loved him. Fact. Ichako blinks back tears and shrugs her shoulders at Mina. I don't know if I was made for anyone. I don't think I have a soulmate. And I'm not okay with that. I tried to cheat Goddess by forcing myself to be with a human, her throat is tight. So she made me pay. Mina pulls her, forcefully, into a hug. Ichako melts into it and if a few tears slip, she doesn't dwell on it. There's fire in Mina's eyes when she lets go. That guy's a piece of shit. If you promise loyalty to another and break that vow while they continue to fulfill it, you're scum. Ichako nods while the larger woman continues, you gotta know though, that there's a reason why she brought you here. Goddess only serves justice to those who deserve it. And I've known you a day and I already know you didn't deserve a betrayal like that. Mina pushes at Ichako's shoulder playfully with a growing grin, she starts to walk away backward and the brunette is quick to keep up with her. Ichako's mood already starting to become lighter. There is something infectious about Mina in that way, how she brightens a room or a person in a matter of seconds. That just means that shit is gonna get a whole lot better for you very soon. And as the most bangin' member of this community, I can guarantee that to be true. Midoriya Izuku has had visions ever since he presented at the age of 11. At first, it was the smallest events that would filter through. Like what type of ice cream his mother was going to bring home or what color shirt his homeroom teacher was going to wear the next day. With time came the cultivation of his ability, and Izuku openly admits to being a perfectionist. It took countless hours, days, months, and years in order to get to the point where he could hone in on specific topics, grasping hold of crucial details that saved lives. That had saved his life. In this came his ability to piece apart the larger events that surrounded his pack. Whether harvest would be successful or not, if the flu was going to spread across their settlement, or even if a rogue war would attempt to cross into their territory. Izuku makes it his duty to be an absolute asset to his pack. He owes it to them because every day they put trust in him to deliver accurate prophecies. That way everyone can protect what they worked so hard to build. In the last few months, though, his visions have become increasingly concerning. Most of them surrounded UA being plotted against by several groups of rogues led by the infamous League pack. It's well known that League is a decaying pack. Their structure and foundation is riddled with ignorance and hatred. Unfortunately, they are also known for their manipulative nature. So as warped as they are, they always succeed in bringing in new pack members due to the lies they string in order to keep vulnerable or dependent. League's problem is their retention rate. For as many newcomers they con, they have just as many who defect after a few years. This was the area of tension Izuku uncovered. The number one pack League defectors turn to for aid, shelter and community is UA. League understands UA's generosity as a threat to the livelihood of their pack. But to Izuku, that motivation felt too shallow. For as shifty as League is, they aren't tactless and wouldn't start planning a full-scale attack over a few hundred members defecting. So Izuku dug deeper and quickly found that the newly appointed alpha of League is the estranged grandson of the late founder of UA, Shimura. There wasn't much available in the way of documents on their original founder, even if it was only 2 generations before he and the boys came into power. Which meant that his mentors and role models were purposefully keeping quiet about the details surrounding her, or that she hadn't been written into their pack's young history. Both possibilities were equally worrying. Izuku immediately relayed everything to both of his mates, and between the 3 of them, they were conflicted on where to begin uncovering the truth. They each held immense respect for the previous alpha, All-Mighter Yagi Toshinori, who happened to be the direct disciple of Shimura and would most likely know the truth. Izuku needed to understand why the grandson of their original founder would want to destroy their pack, he couldn't see the whole picture, and it made his skin crawl. The days that he was on edge began to outnumber the days he wasn't. Something about the situation was eating at him, and he wouldn't let himself relax until all the players were on the table, until he knew he could see everything. What if the attack was really warranted? How could they know when there was virtually no information about who UA's original founder was? Him, Kitsuki, and Shadow had only been in power for a little over 9 years, they had so much they still needed to learn. And Izuku would be damned if they learned the hard way and their pack members paid the price. So when things started to get really rocky at home, he wasn't too surprised. Part of Izuku knew that their relationship was taking a huge toll. Okay, all of Izuku knew that their relationship, their dynamic, their little world they had built from the ground up, was wavering. There wasn't a fiber in his being that wasn't jumping day in and day out at the weakening of their bond. The budding threat on the horizon had each of them anxious and it showed in different ways. In Izuku, it was to bury himself in as much pack history as he could muster, and then some. If he wasn't in the pack library or the study in their home, he was visiting the pack shaman trying to figure out how to sharpen his abilities. In Kitsuki, it was him not being able to finish or sometimes even start a sentence without becoming inconceivably angry. He worked out a lot more with Kirishima, sometimes training until dawn. Too often he slept in the beta house instead of coming to bed at home. And when Izuku asked why the blonde hissed, "Ha. And be the only fucker sleeping there at night. You're out of your fucking mind, Deku." And it was true. Because in Shoudo, it was him disappearing. Shoudo always appreciated his solitude. Kitsuki and Izuku usually respected it since when he was around he'd be so clingy, touchy, and doting. But even when Shoudo wasn't off wherever Shoudo went when he wanted some distance, he'd be cold and aloof. And Izuku knew it wasn't personal, in his heart he knew that. They had never faced such a direct threat before, not one that was calculated and premeditated. Not that they didn't think they were strong enough, but that their peace was being disrupted for the first time in their leadership. That alone would be enough to strike anxiety in anyone. But in his heart, Izuku also knew that their bond wasn't complete as just the three of them. It was still beautiful, he was so happy and full of love for both of his alphas. Even with all the tension, he never once questioned his dedication to them. Not once. But he did give a lot of thought to the sinking pit in his stomach. And how he was sure that they felt it too. Which was why when he began having the other visions, he was even more stricken than when he'd seen League plotting how to sink their fangs into UA. The first time it catches him completely off guard. He crosses his legs, palms on his knees, taking one last look at the view of the water from their lakeside gazebo, where he often comes to meditate and focus on his visions. Izuku closes his eyes, lashes tickling the highest arches of his cheeks as he relaxes into the warm darkness. But instead of the vision taking a few moments to come into focus, it's upon him immediately. He's sitting in the passenger seat of a small car. He realizes it isn't another vision about League, none of them traveled by car, and it isn't too common for War to travel by vehicle. The car swerves sharply to the right side of the road. This draws his attention to the driver. He can tell that she's, well, a she. Her face is a blur like someone took an eraser and swiped it through her delicate features. And maybe they aren't delicate, but he has the instinctive feeling that they are. Her shoulders quake and he realizes as her arms are tensed that her small hands are gripping the steering wheel so tight that her knuckles are turning pale white. The car comes to a halt. He hears her take a few labored breaths and he knows it's not working. He knows she's feeling ill, that however hard she's trying to calm herself she can't. It's almost like she throws open her car door and vomits violently, coughing through the rougher parts. Izuku wants nothing more than to rest a soothing hand on her back, to rub the tension out of her muscles, and let her sleep in his arms. He can't see her face, but he knows she's tired. He pulls back slightly from the vision. He's never struggled with staying objective during his prophecies, and he's never felt a connection quite like the one that's immediately bloomed between him and the faceless woman. She settles back into the car, her short breaths becoming tight gasps. She then hurriedly leans into the space she doesn't know he's occupying, tearing open the glove box and taking out an inhaler. So she's human. He's never heard of her having asthma, possibly she's a hybrid, but even then that would be a bit of a reach. Izuku counts 3 puffs she breathes in, she then lets her arm go limp. He watches in growing concern as she sits completely still, he'd think that the vision had frozen if it wasn't for the shallow rise and fall of her soft chest. The rise and fall quickly become hiccups as he watches the young woman absolutely break into pieces in front of his eyes. Without being able to see her features, it leaves some grief to his imagination. He's gifted with her sobs in full detail, however, and Izuku has to fight the thick feeling in the back of his throat as he sits through the long minutes of this. He knows that this isn't a woman who let herself feel this low very often. After her breathing slightly evens out again, she freezes in terror as she scrambles to pull out her phone. "Hey, honey, what's going on?" The voice that answers the woman's call is one that Izuku knows very well, "You're Raka Mikoto, their pack's doctor." "Mom." Broken and raw, the words sounding stuck. A plea, stained by hopelessness. It's the first thing he hears her utter that ends the vision. He's panting in the shade of the gazebo, clutching tightly at his chest. Izuku's heart still hammering from the sound of her voice. She's lost and grieving, and possibly has been for a very long time. And Izuku just knows. He knows. That this woman is what will stop the sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. Their stomachs. The person that'll complete their bond. The visions continue like this, but they're far less tragic and only serve to draw Izuku deeper into who exactly this Uraraka woman was. It's little flashes. Her face, still a blur, turned up to the sun as she stares at a forest. Her feet covered by canvas sneakers as she steps into a gas station. Her humming to a song as she stops at a red light. And Izuku realizes after a couple of weeks of this that he needs to let the boys know. He's never been more certain that he found the fourth to their dynamic and that she's coming to completely upend their lives in UA. But both of his alphas are away from home. They talked carefully about the longer missions. Usually, Izuku wasn't used to them being away from UA for more than a couple of weeks. However, they had a generally mature conversation, excluding Kitsuki's bitching and moaning about how they were pussies for talking about feelings before proceeding to get the most heated about expressing his feelings. The conclusion was that some space would be a good start in order to ease some tension. On their missions to Northland and coastal packs, they'd be forging alliances, trying to dig up any kind of information other packs had on Shimura, and hopefully, missing each other. Izuku is past missing them and needs them to get back to UA ASAP. He can feel the intensity of the visions increasing, his own body winding up in anticipation. It's during a panicked episode, the night before what he is certain is the day he will meet their fourth, that he calls Shadow and Kitsuki to let them know. Kitsuki's call is a short-lived one, the receiver lets him know that the phone is not in service, meaning the blonde likely destroyed his seventh cell phone. Shadow answers on the second ring. When Izuku finishes blathering his way through explaining his prediction and feelings in what feels like one breath, Shadow lets out the deepest sigh of relief Izuku's heard from him in a while. He then promises to be back within the next week at most. It's a weight off of Izuku's shoulders. But the following day, it's as if that weight returns tenfold. Not even the humming and tingling of his soul mark can draw his attention from her. Izuku can barely choke out the rest of his speech. Usually, he would be able to come up with something on the spot, but out of fear for this exact scenario, he wrote down what to say. It was a great call too because as she's finally right in front of him, Izuku knows he wouldn't be able to string an original sentence together, even if his life depended on it. His heart thuds dangerously in his chest, pure adrenaline making his legs quake. His being, his nature, his wolf, every part of him demands contact. This is the moment of true clarity he's waited for his entire life. All the pieces have slotted together, and there is no hidden variable or emptiness that he has to ignore. Their features are delicate, as he guessed. Her eyes are like smooth honey waiting to be stirred into hot tea, lips plump from being worried too often between her teeth, her rounded cheeks and jaw all shaded rosily. Chin-length hair, the color of sunlit mahogany bark, swaying with each breath that she takes. Izuku has spent, essentially, his entire 26 years of life being attracted to two men, women never even registered to him. He never paid any mind to what features were considered desirable on the opposite sex, there was no need to. Despite this, as he eyes his third soulmate from head to toe, he knows she's the pinnacle of feminine beauty. It's her. Her raw energy, her scent, the way she has yet to break eye contact with him. Izuku startles out of his thoughts, the confusion in her eyes shifts from increasingly panicked then back to quizzical. He regains enough focus to see that the crowd is dispersing, but he knows something is wrong. She shouldn't look this bewildered. He knows exactly how it feels to know. When he realized who Kaken and Shadow were to him, he'd never been as certain as he was in those moments, save for this moment now. As he looks at her he knows that they are not experiencing the same thing, he can see it in her entire demeanor which is stained with uncertainty. It's almost like he's openly panicking as he scents the air again. This time looking for something, anything to prove what he is fearing wrong. She smells like peaches, car air freshener, and Kleenex. There are also hints of a male human scent that still cling to her skin. That was something else entirely that also needed unpacking, but Izuku couldn't even begin to fathom it because not human, she's clearly a hybrid. But not a presented one, there's not even a hint of a second gender. He stands on the podium, numb and dumbfounded. How does he know she's theirs, then? How is it that the incomplete soul mark on the nape of his neck that sat dormant for over 10 years is aching while she doesn't even have one yet? Their soulmate has no clue that she's theirs and that they're hers. Not a mark, not a feeling, no kind of inclination. He needs to get to the bottom of this before the boys get home and the entire situation gets messier. Izuku quickly promises himself that he'll grieve in the quiet of the pack library and not on the podium in front of her. The research on League could wait, the brunette standing before him was proving to be even more of an anomaly and is far more important than any petty war would ever be. Izuku leaves. League is a huge shit show, so I really don't think you got a good feel for what pack is actually about. Mina kicks up gravel as she practically skips next to Ichako as they approach the beta house, it's way more than a pissing contest over who's the strongest and beating the shit out of each other. Ichako is listening to every word the pink-haired woman is saying, but she can't help the doubt that weighs each of her steps. She warily looks at the large house they're now directly in front of and then meets Mina's encouraging gaze. I pinky promise that they're all super nice, she links her arm with Ichako's giving her a kind smile before she starts taking confident steps up the front stairs, I even told them to have lunch ready by the time I got back with you. We're all really looking forward to showing you what a real pack is like. She's definitely heard that line before, unfortunately, it never brought her much luck. Achako tries to steel herself as Mina drags her through the doorway, she really wants to believe in this pack, but she's already in such a fragile mental state. Achako has no clue how she would handle even more rejection at this point. It's like she blinks and there's Mina shutting the door behind them as she calls out their arrival to her housemates. Achako decides to hyperfixate on the house itself in order to get rid of some nerves. The ceiling is high, there's a wide staircase to the right of the front door that leads up to a second floor where she'll assume there are bedrooms. They're standing in a small foyer area, the ground in front of the door is stone, while she notes that the living room area is all hardwood. There's furniture that looks cozy, but not nearly as much as Achako would assume for a place that housed 5 adults. Yo. We're all in here. A man's voice calls out to them. Mina grins in response before motioning for Achako to slip her shoes off. Momo's real into the whole shoes off in the house thing, we're huge fucking wolves half the time, so I don't really get it, but hey. Whatever keeps mom happy. For your information, it helps keep our home clean. I swear if you all did not have me, this place would be horrific. There's a pause from the mature voice that called out to them, and stop calling me mom. Mina snickers at Achako's side as she leads the way into the next room, where even more snickers are circulating. Achako stops looking down at her feet once she notices that the hardwood floors have changed to pristine kitchen tile. She then takes a few moments to look around the room as Mina goes to introduce her. There are 3 men and 2 women, all of which look around her age and are each attractive in their own right. They remind her of the large friend group she'd see around campus when she was in college. They were the type to always be completely wrapped up in their own world. Achako had always been kinda intimidated by those groups, also a little bit jealous. This is your Raka, Achako. She lifts her chin a little bit and squares her shoulders. Achako isn't gonna let herself sabotage her chances of making new friends this time around. She silently reminds herself that she needs to stop worrying about the things that she can't change anymore and needs to start paying attention to a new start. It's nice to meet you all. Achako bows her head to the group before looking back up at them with fierce determination. At first, they all seem at a loss of what exactly to say in response. The air in the room was starting to feel too thick for Achako to breathe as she shifts her weight from one foot to another. Then something clicks and all of them start laughing. She looks at Mina for help but catches her giggling too, covering her mouth as she shoots Achako an apologetic look. Achako has no clue why they're laughing as much as they are. Mina couldn't have possibly brought her here just to humiliate her in front of her actual friends. There was no way the pink-haired woman had been anything but genuine to her so far. Even so, Achako starts to feel her hands clam up and her cheeks flush. Mina speaks up, voice still wavering a little. Okay, she's starting to get nervous, shut up and introduce yourselves. Sorry. She's just so stiff. The blonde man that has what looks like a black lightning bolt died into his locks starts to giggle again, but the purple-haired woman next to him with earbuds hanging around her neck pulls at his ear harshly. Okay. Kaminari Denki. Jiro, fuck off. Shut up, moron. The short-haired woman rolls her eyes at him after letting go of his ear. She meets Achako's dazed stare and shoots her a small smile. Jiro Kyoka. Nice to meet you, Uraraka. Achako coughs nervously before quickly replying, it's nice to meet you too, Jiro. Ah, you too, Kaminari. She bows her head again instinctively. She straightens when muffled laughter starts to echo through the room again, Mina being the largest culprit with her pink cheeks obviously puffed out. Achako has no clue what she's doing that's so hilarious to everyone. She has half a mind to ask, but she's too anxious. There she goes again, so formal. One snickers, he has shoulder-length hair and looks pretty lanky from where he's sat on the kitchen counter. His grin is infectious though, especially as he turns his attention to Achako. Sirohanta, at your service, cutie. She finds herself matching his smile, nice to meet you, Siro. Achako lets some of the stress leave her shoulders as she turns her attention to the 2 people she still hasn't learned the names of. The muscular Reed meets her gaze with a friendly chuckle as he raises a hand to greet her. There you go. A little less tense, huh? Achako scratches the back of her neck with an awkward laugh of her own. Yeah, sorry about that, haha. Nah, don't be sorry, he backtracks with his hands raised like he's trying to reassure her. I'm Kirishima Jiro, nice to meet you. Achako can feel most of her anxiety simmer down with the kindness she finds in Kirishima's smile. As she looks around the room she can tell that she's only being received with goodwill. There aren't any ulterior motives to be found, no one wants to hurt her, and she finds peace in that. Finally, she looks at the long-haired beauty that sat in one of the bar stools at the kitchen's granite island. Although her beauty is definitely intimidating, Achako only finds warmth in the woman's eyes. Hello, I am Yaoi Rozu Momo. However, I insist you call me Momo. Her smile falters a little, and her eyebrow twitches as she turns her focus to everyone else in the room. And please, under no circumstances, call me mom, everyone seems to have gotten a little too comfortable. Momo's met with immediate outrage as the entire room bursts into complaints. Jiro trips Kaminari as he attempts to hop out of his seat. Despite having just fallen on his face, he somehow still manages to make it to Momo just to cling to her leg. But mom. She instantly pushes him away, her foot colliding with the middle of the blonde's chest. This sends him flying across the room and onto his back, his head practically at Ichako's feet. Jiro points at Kaminari, "Why do you look so shocked, Dumbus?" She snickers wickedly as Kaminari whimpers. "Momo, she just got here. You can't already try to get her on your side. No fair." Mina whines at top volume, she then gathers Ichako up into her arms and squeezes her like she's a toy. Ichako's too busy giggling to care as she turns her attention to Siro's loud yawning. "Mom, Momo. Coincidence? I think not." He calmly argues but still ducks his head when Momo shoots him an annoyed glare. Siro notices her entertained grin. "I rest my case." He whispers loud enough for every single person in the room to hear. Momo looks like she's about to start cursing, but Kirishima makes his way to stand behind her chair and she immediately leans back with a long sigh. Ichako looks between the two of them in confusion until Kirishima starts to massage the woman's shoulders and she realizes then that this must be a regular thing. There. The redhead coos. It's Ichako's turn to laugh at top volume. She literally can't even contain the peals of giggles that rip through her as she leans more into Mina's, now loosening, grip. They look at her like they have no clue what was so funny to her. She can't even give them an explanation through her laughter, and Ichako can tell that they don't expect one as she watches smiles form on their faces. Kaminari sits up from where he's still laid out on the floor, he turns around and crosses his legs as he looks up at her. I don't know if you already knew this, but you're a whole lot cuter when you're not stiff as hell and shitting bricks. Mina instantaneously shoves his shoulder back, so his back collides with the floor again. What kind of backhanded compliment is that, asshole? Ichako waves Mina off, pulling out of the woman's grasp finally. She extends her hand to Kaminari who looks disoriented and then surprised as he takes it. He's right, I was really nervous coming here, but you know what? Ichako straightens up as she helps the blonde up to his feet, her smile only growing as she looks around the room to everyone. I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And to her core, she truly believes that. She's given a spastic tour of their house, which is incredibly gorgeous, something that Momo takes 99% of the credit for. Ichako learns that although they do have their own rooms, most nights they all end up sleeping in a pile in front of the fireplace in the living room, hence the lack of furniture. They then seem to remember that the whole point of inviting her over was for lunch. This brings Ichako to now as she's being led down their huge backyard and toward the lake. Momo walks beside her with a massive picnic basket that Ichako doubts she would be able to carry casually in one hand, like the taller woman is. Mina excitedly suggested that they ate at the lakeside for Ichako's benefit. However, as she watches the pink-haired woman running circles around both Kaminari and Siro, she thinks it was definitely for her own gain too. Ichako doesn't really realize how far ahead of everyone else is until Kirishima tosses an unsuspecting Jiro into the water. Chaos ensues. Soon everyone has been drawn into the lake except for Momo and herself. Momo sighs a little tiredly as she watches the five of them splash around. What are your thoughts on UA so far? I have been wondering. Surprisingly, it really wasn't a loaded question. Ichako knew exactly how she felt right now, and that kind of certainty is something she hasn't actually felt in. Well. She doesn't even remember the last time she felt this kind of ease. I think I could be happy here. Momo turns her gaze to her. They've made it to the picnic table that rests right next to the lake shore, she sets the basket there before speaking. I do not know what has brought you here or what has happened in your life that has led you to us. And I do not expect to be allotted that information because it is not necessary in order for me to be a good friend to you. Ichako has no idea what it is about Momo's words, but before she can try to put a front up, tears instantly prick her eyes. She breaks eye contact to stare down at where the grass of the yard ends and the sand of the shore starts. Uraraka, Momo taps under her chin with one slim finger, bringing their eyes to meet again. There is no shame in letting yourself heal. The pain is a part of the process. The dark-haired woman smiles fully as she cocks her head. It's like a fresh wound that starts to bleed again. Every time she feels like she's made serious headway, Ichako is also reminded of her grief. Part of her understands what Momo is trying to get at. The larger part of herself forces her to hold back her sobs until it's physically impossible for her to anymore and it all comes bubbling over the top. She's kind to herself as she remembers that it's only been a couple days since shit hit the fan. That reminder only does so much to lessen her embarrassment as Momo wraps her arms around her soothingly as she continues to cry. As if sensing this, the other woman mumbles that Ichako has nothing to be ashamed of. And Ichako believes her. She wails into Momo's chest, face damp and hair sticking to her chubby cheeks. Everything else becomes muted to Achako as she focuses all her energy on trying to breathe through her mouth. She only startles when she feels cold wet skin pressing to hers on all sides. Her eyes are puffy and the tears are clouding her vision, but after taking a good look at what's now surrounding her, she's stunned into silence. The betas hug and nuzzle her at all sides. Mina is playing with her hair gently, Kirishima rubs her neck much like how had done with Momo not an hour earlier, and Kaminari sways everyone softly. She hears humming coming from Jiro, who has tucked herself under Achako's left arm, which Shiro is also tracing intricate patterns on. Each of them is comforting her in the way that they know best, and that alone makes Achako start to cry harder. Other than Sayu, Achako has never been truly cared for by friends. She understands that a good portion of how honest, tactile, and caring they were was due to cultural differences. It makes her want to grow closer to her heritage because somehow, this is exactly what she needs. When her breath starts to even out and she begins to wiggle, they all pull away. For a moment, all eyes are on her. Everyone seems to be checking in, different expressions filtering through their faces as they do so. When she gives them a watery but genuine smile, it's like a play button is pressed. Kaminari is the first to break the silence and does so by grouching at Momo. "Goddess, Mom, we leave you alone with your Raka for 5 fucking minutes. Damn. For once, I kinda agree with Dumbus here. Geez, do you work fast, Momo." Jiro stretches her arms above her head as she looks between Achako and Momo. Momo shrugs her shoulders, we could all smell the grief coming off of her, I did not want to leave it unaddressed. She deserves to know that this is a safe space for her to truly express herself. She frowns at Kaminari, and don't call me mom. Achako's eyes go huge as she looks between everyone in a panic. You can smell feelings. Shiro smirks, hell yeah we can and you smelled like a hot garbage fire full of betrayal, despair, and heartbreak. That cry sesh really helped with the stench though. He flashes her 2 thumbs up and Achako can't help but laugh. Mina, not finding it nearly as funny, smacks him across the back of his head. "Goddess, you're such an insensitive dipshit sometimes." Mina turns her attention back to Achako, better. And Achako feels so much lighter it's stunning. She just cried earlier that day and she guesses that didn't even scrape the tip of the iceberg. Now, it felt like she got so much off of her chest without ever having to open her mouth to explain herself. Yeah, tons. She bobs her head aggressively until a large hand stops her head from moving, then ruffles her hair playfully. Kirishima gives her a once-over before coming to the same conclusion that everyone seemed to have. That she is doing worlds better than she was before. Kirishima grins at her, alright. Now let's eat. When she started her day, Achako planned on seeing her mother at the hospital and touring the actual town of Yue. However, after being egged on to eat way more than she usually would, her huge lunch felt like it was physically weighing her down. The betas laughed at her as they poked Achako's slumped-over body. After she had finished her 4th sandwich, she only managed a long groan in response before resting her eyes for 15 minutes at the picnic table. Once Achako could sit up straight again, she knew that there was no way she'd be making it to visit her mom. She did feel a streak of motivation shoot through her, though, and she decided it was time to finally unpack her car. "I'll walk back with ya, Achako." Mina beams not a breath after Achako announces that she really enjoyed herself, but she was gonna head home to nap. She pats Mina on the shoulder a couple times with a small smile. "I know you might feel guilty for making me eat that last slider, but I think I can manage the walk by myself. It's like, right there." Achako nods her head in the direction of the cabin as Mina starts to whine. Mostly, Achako doesn't want any of the betas' help with unloading her car. Mina would absolutely flex her strength if given the chance, and after spending a good part of the afternoon with everyone else, she's positive that they would do the same. So Achako quickly says her goodbyes with promises to come to visit again very soon. She's 99% sure that they'll catch on to the fact that she is, in fact, not napping, but she shrugs it off and focuses on her walk back to the redwood cabin. The territory really is beautiful, everything is blooming and becoming saturated with vivid colors as May pushes on. Insects flutter around the sides of the gravel road in the tall grasses that line the start of the forest to the left of the road. She can see them collect in the grassy fields to the right of the road that leads down to the shoreline. Birds chirp at each other conversationally filling the air with their music and she watches 2 squirrels climb their way up an oak tree. Once she's back at her car in front of the cabin, she pops her trunk. Achako only managed to fit one of the huge duffel bags and her monster suitcase in the trunk of her car, the other was laid out in the backseat. She huffs, opening the back passenger door of her Camry and goes to work trying to lug it out. As she feared, Achako really had been driven by some sort of superhuman adrenaline strength as she originally hauled everything out of her apartment in the first place. Now that she's face to face with her baggage again, she's not sure how she's going to get it up the porch stairs. She grumbles as she takes a moment to tie her hair up into a choppy ponytail before attempting to pull the strap around her shoulder again. There's no way she's asking anyone for help though, she'll figure it out somehow. Ochako finally manages to waddle up the pathway and to the stairs, her knee nearly buckles once she gets to the first step, but as she starts to fall backward, she catches herself before regaining her balance with a railing. Pulling the door open is another mission in itself, but after she makes it inside, it's smooth sailing to her bedroom. She can feel her pits getting damp, and her breath is already catching as she walks out to her car again. Ochako shuts the back passenger door before approaching the trunk cautiously. She does a lot of staring at the last two massive bags before even attempting to take a stab at trying to carry either one of them. Ochako can't be too shocked, considering her entire life is packed into them. She'd be a little embarrassed if they weren't heavy. Letting out a long sigh, she starts to pull at the strap of the second duffel. She lines the strap over her right shoulder before starting to lift it out of the trunk. For a moment it feels even heavier than the first bag that she had almost broken her neck trying to actually get into the house. But in the next second, it's weightless. Ochako stares at her chubby bicep, wondering what kind of sorcery is taking place. She just struggled to get the first duffel in, there was no way she grew massive guns in the 2 minutes between then and now. It's then that she catches a broad-shouldered figure in her peripheral vision. Naturally, she jumps back with a loud gasp before tripping over her own 2 feet with the elegance of a newborn deer. Ochako's already bracing for her butt to hit the gravel when a thick arm comes around her waist to stop her fall. Piercing green eyes. They left her breathless at the packed dinner, and now that she's already relatively winded, her heart stutters too. Up close, they are unlike anything she's ever seen. As if pieces of the forest and the sun have been grafted into his gaze. His freckles spot his eyelids too, they're more scarce than the ones on the rest of his face, but they're there. Ochako can't speak, the knot in her throat is too much, and for a moment, she's almost positive that he's struggling to talk too. What, with the way his Adam's apple bobs and his eyes lower before making contact with hers once again, is he nervous? Why would one of the leaders of UA be nervous around her? And more importantly, why is he right next to her with her bag over his shoulder and his arms still around her waist holding her up? She quickly realizes it's likely because of the absolute death grip she has on the collar of his white t-shirt. Once she lets go, he promptly does so too, like he's just been burnt. Ochako confidently blathers to the absolutely jacked, ethereal, freckle-covered man before her. She wants to crawl into bed and never get out again, she's so embarrassed. Her face stings, it's so flushed. Sorry for startling you there. I was really just trying to be helpful, I saw you struggling. He nods his head over to the large house adjacent to the redwood cabin, the one she had overlooked upon arriving, due to the excitement of seeing her mom again. So they were neighbors, how could her mom forget to mention that? She has to go to sleep at night, knowing that just across the street this man was doing the same. Ochako reminds herself of what both Mina and her own mother had told her. This was someone who had not one but two soulmates. Ochako can't even remember his name clearly right now, but she does know that he's not thinking of her the same way that she is with him. He's happy, he has his love life sorted out. Ochako needs to stop deluding herself and maintain some sense of dignity. She can't help but take another good look at the width of his shoulders and the bulk of his biceps, though. Ochako could look still, it didn't mean anything was gonna come out of it necessarily. She scolds herself again for thinking like a perverted old man, before realizing that he was patiently waiting for a response. Oh my goddess, never mind. Hi, I'm Yuraka Ochako, and as you can see, she kindly gestures to her disheveled appearance and the fact that he is now carrying her luggage. I'm a hot mess right now. Sorry, it's kinda graphic. And sorry you just had to save me from dislocating my shoulder probably. He stares at her for several beats, it's the first time she's been 100% herself with anyone here. Not that the kinda quiet, sad, soft Ochako wasn't also her, since it's all her, really. It's just that this is the version she reverts to most often when she's alone, the her that is at the end of her goddamn rope and is so sick of the constant everything. She meets his gaze after a few moments of silence. The birds still chirp from the treetops, the sun is still beating down on them, the wind still rustles the strands of Ochako's hair that have long since fallen out of her haphazard ponytail. Nothing has stopped for them because this isn't that. Instead, he grins at her and it's wide, bright, and a little rough around the edges cause it's real. They're being honest with each other. Honestly, I think a couple scraped knees would have been more likely than a dislocated shoulder from what I saw. But I'm Midoriya Izuku, and as you could have guessed, I'm going to help you with these to avoid any sort of bloodshed. He quirks a brow. Sounds good. Ochako pouts but wordlessly bobs her head. Midoriya immediately lifts her suitcase with ease, he shuts her trunk, readjusts the duffel bag from where it hangs off his shoulder, and lifts the suitcase with one hand. She's too busy picking her jaw off the gravel to notice that he's waiting for her to lead the way. He gives her a playful smile that edges on a smirk. Well. She senses that Midoriya is similar to her in that he has different versions of himself because the person standing before her and the person who gave the speech last night seem to be both worlds apart and all the same. Ichako always felt like maybe she was being dishonest when she withheld those parts of herself from those she didn't know well. Seeing Midoriya doing the same gives her a great deal of comfort. She also tried to tamper down her excitement at the fact that instead of blocking her out when she showed him her, he let her in. This wasn't that, he had his mates, he was happy. Ichako leads the way and promises herself that they'll be friends. Maybe even best friends. It's like Ichako blinks and an entire week goes by. She blames it on the frenzied energy of the pack, especially the betas who are essentially a whirlwind of spontaneity. She visits the hospital regularly to eat lunch with Mikoto. The staff is starting to get used to seeing her face every other day and always greet her with large smiles that Ichako's gotten better at returning. Mikoto is busy, not as terribly as she was at League, but it's enough that she's usually out of the house for the entire day. And although Ichako was nervous at first about loneliness or history repeating itself, the crucial difference between then and now is that she's an adult. She doesn't mind being left to her own devices. Ichako loves being able to fill her days with what she wants to do. This is the first time in her life that she doesn't have some set routine that's been foisted on her like a curse. Ichako spends her mornings lounging in the sun or tending to Mikoto's garden. After she starts getting bored, she'll make lunch and either take it to the hospital for her mom or to the beta house for those who happen to be around. Some sort of adventure usually ensued, though she's quickly learned that even though the betas are chaotic, they take their pack duties incredibly seriously since their positions are coveted. She's shown the town square by the betas and Kaminari snipes about it not having a Starbucks, but the excitement of going window shopping is clear in his eyes. Ichako buys several UA-themed knickknacks, even going as far as getting an extra-large hoodie with the silhouette of the lake printed onto it. She's sure that in a couple more weeks, she'll start to feel stir-crazy and will look for some sort of job within UA. The bartering system that functions alongside their regular currency is taking her some getting used to, especially with her background in accounting. Money not being a looming issue is so foreign to Ichako that she has Momo explain it to her about 4 times before she feels like she understands. So when she bought her comfy UA hoodie, Ichako paid in cash, but she could have offered to clean the windows of the storefront or even help with stocking the shelves instead. UA's trading with outsiders is their primary source of income. The territory is apparently chock full of precious minerals, as well as a natural spring that lays 20 miles west of the main settlement but still is well within UA boundaries. Ultra-natural spring water is sold all over the country, this covers the costs that keep the pack thriving. The mineral sales keep the lifestyle at UA comfortable, and food was not an issue due to the farming that took place within the territory. Ichako knows that an immense amount of work must have taken place in order for UA to seamlessly run itself now, and she can't help but be awestruck by all of it. Mikoto hadn't been lying when she originally talked the pack up to her and called it honorable, that was an understatement if anything. Ichako has wasted too much of her energy freaking out about money. Since she was a kid she's fretted about how she could make a decent living and never have to worry about starving or going without. Even with the accounting degree, it wasn't as if she had woken up one morning and decided that a math-heavy career path really did it for her, she landed on accounting out of fear, not passion. This seems to be a reoccurring trend in a frightening amount of her actions, up until recently at least. Lately, she's been stepping out of her comfort zone and doing what feels right. Well, what feels right and what is right aren't always the same thing. Most of the time it matches up, especially at UA, but there is one debilitating mismatch. And that is Midoriya Izuku. Since they first met each other, Ichako spent an embarrassingly massive amount of time with him. Not that it's one-sided at all, most of the time he's the one seeking her out. But the intensity and quantity of it is enough to earn curious looks from the betas and secretive smiles from Mikoto who affirms that she knew Midoriya would like her. She thinks it would be insidious if she weren't having so much fun. He creeps into her day-to-day. Ichako never knew a week of constantly being engaged, and having someone's undivided attention could be dangerous. It's been years since she's interacted with anyone like this. By day 4 she catches herself pouting if he's even 2 minutes late to their usual midday banter. They trail the lakefront as they share whatever meal Ichako has decided to pour her freshly awake anxious energy into. More often than not, she winds up giving half of her portion to whatever wildlife is bustling near the beach. Midoriya doesn't need to know why, he smiles at her kindness regardless of what it's motivated by. He tells her he wishes he wanted to share her food with the wild or with anyone else, but he doesn't. With a shrug of her shoulders, she continues to hand-feed the creatures that wander up to her. Their attention is almost always primarily on Midoriya as they quake cautiously, instincts telling them they're too close to a predator. She lets her silence answer his questioning looks. Being in his presence turns her stomach so pleasantly that the air shakily filling her lungs makes her feel full enough. And each time she catches a glimpse of his sculpted midriff, she's reminded of how different they are physically. They're in two different leagues. Ripped mystical pack leader and chubby ordinary sad girl. Very compatible as close friends and great for a quickly developing one-sided crush on her part. Nothing more though. She can't help wondering and then wondering more what her life could have been if she grew up in UA with Midoriya. So yes, insidious but also exciting and warm. On her 8th day there, he takes her to the pack library. With a blush, he mumbles that when he's not with her he's almost always here. And if not at the library he's with the pack shaman. Achako is certain her raised brow speaks louder volumes than her calling him a nerd aloud ever could. She knows because of how he ducks his head and throws himself headfirst into giving her a tour. Her first impression is that the library is from a fairy tale. The outside of the stone building drips with ivy that looks tended to, there is a well-loved swing set near, hopscotch chalk brightly lines the walkway. A bronze plaque reads that the library is dedicated to someone named Shimura. Midoriya pulls her in gently, the brush of his fingertips tickling her palm. She tries not to think too much about it. It's not the largest library she's ever been to, but it may be the neatest. If a building could be perpetually photo shoot ready, this was it. The ceiling is higher than she assumed it would have been from the outside, the center of it is made of panes of glass that filter rays of sunlight to illuminate the many shelves. The checkout desk is lined with plants and UA-themed knickknacks, near it are several reading nooks, as well as tables. She spots the children's section with its rainbow carpet, beanbag chairs, the shelves lower and much less imposing than those directly in front of them. He draws her through the aisles, explaining how they are each organized in a low husky tone that makes Achako guiltily bite her lip. She nods and voices her amazement, as well as her curiosity about the pack's history. Midoriya tells her about their founder Shimura, warning that what he knows is not very much. It's enough for Achako who sees herself in the humble origin story of UA. That is a single mother and victim of domestic violence, she escaped from her abusive pack. There were no details of where she came from, what her dynamic was, or how she found such a vibrant territory to call her own. Midoriya speculates that she received a message from Goddess. He easily glosses over those who were in power as grew up. Absolutely beaming about the past alpha, all-mighter Toshinori Yagi, who helped get Ultranatural to where it is now. Having done much of the heavy lifting that made UA fairly easy to manage. It answers most of the questions she had, but it's clear that their short conversation left Midoriya restless. When he starts muttering to himself about the missing history on Shimura, Achako leaves him so she can wander. She's certain that if she let it slip to her new friends how much she enjoys reading, they'll tease her mercilessly, even if it is in good nature. Even Midoriya, who is definitely a nerd, would probably poke fun. Achako catches herself grinning as she rounds another corner. Coming to a full stop, she realizes she's managed to find the aisle on dynamics again. And it's not large, but there is a section for defects. Achako traces her finger down the spines, reading each of the titles. Only 2 really appeal to her, she pulls each of them from the shelf. Bloom, which seems to be a case study on a hybrid that presented around her age. The hybrid encyclopedia, which is exactly what it sounded like. Achako leisurely flicks through her finds. She can tell they're both a bit old, telltale signs being the pages curling in on themselves with a yellow hue. The dates in them point to the mid-60s, 60 years ago, and they were asking questions like the one she has even now. Check them out. The thought stabs through her and pins her in place for a moment before she's nodding to herself. She leaves the aisle to find Midoriya with both books in hand, hoping that she's also walking away from that sensation of being frozen in place. They walk next to each other on the way back to their homes, silly grins that seem to match as they knock arms on every third step, not that she's keeping count. Midoriya isn't a stranger at this point. Neither are the betas. The difference is that she's learning things, intimate things about the betas, and in return, she shares about herself. Like how Mina and Kaminari are platonic soulmates but still have sex. But Jiro and Kaminari, who are not soulmates, go on dates but don't have sex. Well, Kirishima and Momo are called mom and dad for a reason, being soulmates and all. However, they still consider their relationship open, which Zero takes full advantage of. It makes Achako's head spin a little still when she thinks about it, but Mina's voice echoes in her head. The humans really have you out here thinking binary, that's no fun. She's trying to understand her culture, even when she doesn't feel like she belongs. Because again, what feels right and what is right aren't always the same thing. And she's starting to believe she's exactly where she needs to be. What doesn't feel right though is that she's spent a week with Midoriya now and hasn't learned anything about his mates. Or anything really personal. To Ichako, it seems like maybe Midoriya has a past to hide too. That would at least explain some of his hesitance to ask questions about who she is and why she's there in his territory to begin with. And as much as she wants to know everything about him, she's thankful he isn't too curious. Because she knows if he asks she'll spill everything like a faucet, both handles turned on high. They head around back to the garden once they've finally made it back to the cabin, their arms brushing one last time before Ichako leaves his side to grab the hose. You managed to revive the oregano. I knew you would. His exclamation makes her eyes trail back to where he stands, brushing his fingers along the leaves. They've just spent the day together, still, the sight of him kinda knocks the breath out of her. The black tank top looks a little big on him, which is shocking to her since Midoriya is just so broad. Well, his shoulders at least, she can see the softer and curvier lines of his body when it comes to his hips that signal that yes. He's ripped, but that doesn't change the fact that he's an Omega. Omegas can be jacked too, Midoriya is walking dreamy proof. Ichako clears her throat and turns her attention to the plant in question. This week's been so hot, I really think it was just getting too much sun. I moved it on the porch and kept watering it every couple hours. She walks over to him with a proud smile. Definitely had me worried for a minute there, but if there's one thing I know I can do well, it's garden. Midoriya steps closer to her, bumping her hand with his. You always do that. Both her brows rise and she blinks in confusion. The self-deprecation. You never acknowledge what you're good at without it. Midoriya's tone isn't pitying, and it certainly isn't malicious. It just is. Like he's simply stating what he sees. But Ichako also somehow knows the underlying message in what he's saying. We'll work on it together. He does this often. For all the little things he notices and easily picks up only having been around her a week, it makes her nervous about what he's observing and not vocalizing, just silently filing away. Well, I guess I do that. I think of it like joking. He quirks a brow, not buying it. Ichako huffs, then again maybe it's years of being told I'm worthless by people stronger than me finally manifesting itself into my bad humor. She's tried to bullshit Midoriya, he never takes the bait. And as much as Ichako doesn't like how often she compares Midoriya to him, it's a little startling that she could easily keep the man she was going to marry completely in the dark all the time, but can't even tell a white lie to the seer without him noticing. See now that I believe. His grin is a little teasing as he takes her hand into his own. She's reminded again that Midoriya Izuku is a little shit. Vibrant green meets her own brown eyes and she watches as those freckled eyelids droop, the edges crinkling as he begins to laugh. It's clear, bright, and pretty. Ichako could listen to it all day. That's it for today guys, hope you all enjoyed this video. If you do, consider leaving a like, share and subscribe. And don't forget to check out the author of this story. All details in description. Thanks for watching, take care.